Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a fascinating dive straight into the hidden plumbing of Wall Street and the US Treasury. We are going to track a security from its very birth, right through its legal lifespan, all the way to its death, or as the financial world likes to call it, its settlement and redemption. We're talking about a massive trillion-dollar digital ecosystem here, and understanding how this entire timeline works, from signature to settlement, is absolutely going to change how you view your own investments. So let's just dive right into it. So here's a really wild question for you. When you buy a bond, do you actually own it? I mean, you log into your brokerage account, you see a treasury bond sitting right there on your screen, and you'd naturally think your name is written on some master ledger down in Washington, D.C., right? Well, as we'll discover today, there is a massive legal difference between being a beneficial owner and being a registered owner. All right, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're covering the birth of a security, dematerialization and the ledger, Path 1, which is direct holding, Path 2, which is commercial book entry, settlement and seed and co, and finally redemptions and baby bonds. Chapter 1, the birth of a security, legal authorization. You see, every government security out there essentially starts its life with a legal signature. It's a pledge. Take a look at Title 31 of the United States Code, Section 3123. It establishes that the faith of the United States government is pledged to pay in legal tender, principal, and interest. This exact legal statute is what authorizes the Secretary of the Treasury to manage these obligations and ultimately to actually pay the debt. This right here is the absolute bedrock of a security's life. Now, to really understand this financial plumbing, we've got to separate two massive players at birth, the registrar and the fiscal agent. Think of the registrar as holding the title. They're the ones maintaining the definitive official ledger of who legally owns the bond. The fiscal agent, on the other hand, well, they manage the cash flow. For the federal government, the Federal Reserve acts as the fiscal agent, doing all the operational heavy lifting, processing the auctions, issuing the securities, making the actual payments. So legally and operationally, one tracks the title while the other actually moves the cash. Chapter 2, Dematerialization and the Ledger, the end of paper.
So a massive shift goes down in the early 1980s. Historically, bonds were issued in bearer form. That literally meant whoever physically held the paper bond owned it, and you got paid by cutting off little paper coupons. It's crazy to think about now. But in September 1982, Congress enacted the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TFRA for short, and they set a final grace period deadline of June 1983. This act effectively killed off the tax-exempt status of bearer bonds, forcing the entire market to adapt to modern registered systems.
So why did they do this? Well, tax compliance, for sure. Because physical bearer bonds could just be handed over anonymously, they were incredibly easy to use for evading income and estate taxes. So the law mandated what we call dematerialization. This was a huge shift from paper-based physical certificates to a pure book entry system, where ownership is recorded strictly on highly secure electronic ledgers. Basically, if you didn't switch over to a ledger system, you lost your tax benefits. Simple as that. Moving on to Chapter 3, Path 1, Direct Holding. When you go out and buy a bond directly from the government through the Treasury Direct system, the Bureau of the Fiscal Service acts as the administrator. And what's really unique about this setup is that they effectively consolidate both of those roles we just talked about. They act as the registrar, holding the ledger of the who, while simultaneously delegating the how, the actual flow of funds, over to the Federal Reserve as their fiscal agent. And here's where we see a really stark contrast. If you hold a bond in Treasury Direct, or the legacy Treasury Direct system, that's a direct holding. The Treasury literally is the registrar. They have your social security number. They know your exact name. But if you hold your security through a broker, which, let's be honest, is what most of us do, you're operating in the commercial book entry system. And in that tiered system, the Treasury does not possess your individual ownership records. You are officially totally off their main book. Which brings us to Chapter 4, Path 2, Commercial Book Entry. Notice how this system creates a massive bottleneck, building so much distance between you and the government. At the very top, the Treasury issues the obligations. Then, Fedwire tracks the positions of the massive institutional participants. From there, it flows down to the DTC, tracking participant entitlements. And finally, all the way at the very bottom is your local broker or bank, tracking your specific individual customer ownership. The Treasury only ever sees the top levels. They completely rely on those intermediaries to track the everyday investors down at the bottom. Chapter 5, Settlement and Seed and Co. Okay, this right here answers that big secret we talked about at the start. For most stocks and bonds held in standard brokerage accounts, you are absolutely not the registered owner. Seed & Co. is. They are the nominee of the depository trust company. The issuer only sees Seed & Co. on their official ledger, while everyday investors like us, we are merely beneficial owners. We retain the economic rights, like getting paid, but we don't hold the direct legal registration.
Let's break this whole ecosystem down. The DTC, or Depository Trust Company, is essentially the ultimate digital vault and ledger. They hold trillions of dollars in securities completely immobilized. The DTCC is its parent umbrella organization that handles all the clearing for stocks and government securities. Because of this architecture, millions of individual, messy paper trades were totally replaced by simple, clean electronic ledger adjustments among major banks. When your broker holds your assets this way, it's called holding them in street name. If you take away just one thing from this explainer today, make it this crucial concept. The difference between beneficial ownership and registered ownership is the fundamental distinction in modern finance, and it matters immensely. Because if you want to transfer an asset or claim an estate, the Treasury literally cannot help you with commercial book entry assets. They only see seed info. Your broker is entirely 100% responsible for maintaining the detailed ledger of your personal wealth. Chapter 6: Redemptions and Baby Bonds. The end of the line.
So, when a bond finally reaches the end of its life, it matures. And what's super fascinating here is that, according to the rulebooks, maturities are defined as mandatory activities. They're processed without receiving any instructions from the participants. When a bond dies, the DTC just automatically presents a digital letter of transmittal to the redemption agent, collects the funds, allocates the proceeds, and then just deletes the positions from its digital records. Boom. It's totally flawlessly automated.
But, sometimes bonds are called back early by the issuer, and that leads to some incredibly specific mechanics, especially when we talk about baby bonds. Now, a baby bond is just an odd lot security denominated in values of less than $1,000, think $500 or $100. So if an issuer does a partial call, meaning they only want to redeem a portion of the outstanding bonds early, how does the DTC decide whose bonds actually get called? Well, they literally run a lottery. The DTC runs a lottery using standard $1,000 blocks just to equitably allocate which participants get their positions called early, long before their natural death.
Which brings us to our final thought. We've traced the entire life of a security today, from a literal legal signature in the U.S. Code, through the death of physical paper, down that bottleneck into the massive digital vaults of the DTC and Seed & Co., all the way to an automated digital maturity lottery. With trillions of dollars constantly flowing through this automated book entry plumbing and ownership layered so deeply through intermediaries, I'll leave you with this. Could you, or maybe an estate in your family, have a forgotten baby bond or unclaimed asset maturing silently in the system right now? It might just be worth checking your own financial history. Thanks for exploring this hidden financial plumbing with me, and I'll see you next time.